Just a quick introduction to Dr. Maril. She is a licensed psychologist. She's currently at the University of Texas Counseling and Mental Health Center. We're so glad to have her back in Texas, where she spent some time in California and now is back here. Her focus, clinical research focus, is on patients living with chronic illness and on the well being of their caregivers. So appreciate that because often the caregivers get overlooked, and it's a critical component to both us as patients and for them to be taken care of too. Dr. Merrill's mother is a scleroderma patient, and that inspired her studies in the experiences of living with scleroderma. She also works in private practice and provides training to others who want to help patients living with chronic diseases. So I am going to turn over the presentation to Dr. Merrill.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you all for having me. So I appreciate the intro. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm licensed in California and Texas and a few other states. And I'm really excited to be here. I've been working with the Scleroderma Foundation for a good while. I don't know how many years, but it's been a good minute, and I really enjoy it. And I'm happy to be here this morning with y'all. Most of this was gone over before, but what I did want to also bring up is to identify my preferred coping strategies, because we're going to circle back to those as we're talking through this, because I'm going to ask y'all to think about your coping strategies as well. One of the things I really like to do that help me recharge are things like going to see live music, traveling, time with small groups of close friends. I love very long dinners, wine, the ocean, and doing controlled tasks like weeding gardens or organizing, those sorts of things. This will become relevant again as I keep talking. Who I am not is Professor McGonagall, sadly, so I don't have any magic. I'm going to share some things with y'all today that I hope you'll find helpful. Nothing I can give you is any sort of magic trick that is going to make all of your stress go away and magically help you feel like you can handle everything all the time at 100%. I'm all about realistic expectations, and expecting perfection is a recipe for disappointment. So I really encourage people to think about setting bars that are reachable, because it feels really nice when we can achieve a goal, versus setting something unachievable and then we feel down on ourselves when we aren't able to achieve that. So what we're going to talk about today, and I guess by we I mean me, these are things I'm going to talk about today, are the risks of chronic stress, the complications of COVID, and then what we can all do about it. I don't want to spend too much time on the negative stuff. I will review it, but I really do want everybody to leave this session feeling like they have some concrete tools to use to cope as well. So that's my main point here. You know, there are a lot of risks of chronic stress. When we are chronically stressed, we have easier access to stress. So we tend to be more quickly reactive. It's almost like we're gasoline, and all it takes is somebody to light a match, and then we're on fire, we combust. And when we experience stress chronically, that just gets worse. And we also know that things like burnout come from chronic stress, as well as compassion fatigue, and a general physical dysregulation that can show up in a lot of different ways that are particularly important to think about when it comes to if you're living with scleroderma or any other number of illnesses, or if you are a caregiver, if you're experiencing increased stress over a long course of time, you're going to feel these same things too. It's not specific to patients. But these are what some of those things might look like. We know that our immune system can become compromised, and so when we experience frequent colds, people experience change in sleep or appetite, and that can go either way. Sometimes folks, when they're stressed, eat all of the things, and then sometimes people can eat nothing. They can't get anything into their body when they're stressed. Same with sleep. You can be sleeping too much, and could be an inability to sleep. Procrastination, overreacting to unexpected problems. So something maybe that isn't a big deal, hits, and you find yourself again combusting like that gasoline next to a lit match. Isolating yourself, kind of shutting down, maybe picking fights with others might come up just because we're feeling a little agitated. GI problems, maybe things people don't think about as commonly are problems concentrating, not being able to make a decision, seeing only the negative, having racing thoughts, noticing that you're worrying constantly, agitation that can be like internally, that can be like physically having shakes, also loneliness, headaches. All of these are signs that I would consider just red flags or check engine lights. Honestly, when these things start happening, it's a good signal to yourself of like, I need to do some routine maintenance. I think when our check engine light comes in our car, like we have some choices, right? We could just keep on driving, we could ignore it. We know there's a cost to that. Our car is going to break down. We're going to have to do maybe a whole transmission overhaul, something like that, versus, okay, if I pay attention, I check my engine when the light comes on, I can do some things so that I don't have such a catastrophic result, hopefully. So try to think of this as your check engine lights and reflect on what those might be for yourself. And since I'm asking that of you, I will share that, with me. I notice that I just get, one of my check engine lights is I just get short. I'm not as like patient, and a little bit more just short and quick to, and maybe even sharp, quick to get to things and not maybe be my best self or as nice as I prefer to be. And again, I share that to be human about it. We're all humans doing these things. I know some stuff about the brain and about psychology, and also I'm a human and I'm not immune to any of this either. So we are living in this bizarre time, and we have been somehow for almost a year now, which seems a little mind-boggling. But so we haven't had a lot of time to study kind of what the psychological impacts of COVID are going to be. What we do know is historically disasters and recessions are historically associated with higher rates of distress and psychiatric disorders. We know that from natural disasters and going in and studying the effects of those. And what's different about this is that typically natural disasters are acute, right? An earthquake hits, there's that initial, the trauma of it, the destruction of it, but that trauma is contained, stops. The rebuilding doesn't stop, right? But with this pandemic, it's chronic. So it is also lasting a really long time. And so what we are seeing are higher rates of depressive and anxiety disorders, higher rates of relapse among those with alcohol use disorders, higher rates of trauma and of suicidal ideation, and higher rates of substance use overall, particularly opiate overdose. So again, you can see that this study is just from last year, so it's not a huge sample or data collection, but these are the things we're noticing and the trends that we expect to continue as this goes on. If we come out of it, we'll have to see what the impacts are going to be. So we're couching like already chronic stress, right, in this context of a pandemic. And, and for everybody who, we're in Texas, we just had this bananas winter storm, like last week, the week before. That's a whole other extremely stressful situation. I found myself getting really excited just to get back to pandemic normal, when we were without power and water for so long. So just wanting to name that as well for our context right now. Something that's really important that I like to stress, we don't experience chronic stress or what I'll call burnout because we're doing too much. Imagine a lot of people listening to this right now are very aware that you can do a whole lot of things and you can do them well. We burn out not because we're doing a lot of things, we're burning out because we're not taking care of ourselves. So I do want to focus on how we do that today. And you've probably heard people talk about self-care. Certainly, if you've heard me talk about heard me talk before, you've heard me ramble on and on about it. So I hope that if you have heard me talk before, this is a helpful refresher, or maybe you'll learn some new things or hear some things differently than maybe you heard in previous talks I've given. But these are all the areas in which we can practice self-care, and self-care are just things we do that restore balance in our personal and professional lives. In all these different realms, intellectual, physical, spiritual, occupational, environmental, emotional, social, and financial. Now, these are easier to do some days than others. Some of these we have more control over than others. These are really contingent things that can change day to day. So it's not like, okay, I learned how to do physical self-care, I'm done now, right? We know that that's going to change day to day. We know that as a scleroderma patient, what's happening to you physically changes day to day, sometimes hour to hour. So we have to be pretty flexible and creative in what we consider self-care. So we're going to talk about things like beyond just like, oh, go get a manicure, right? I think that's a real common self-care thing that we talk about. Well, we don't get to do that these days, do we? And sometimes we just aren't able to. Scleroderma patients aren't able to do that, and sometimes we don't have the money for that. So we have to figure out ways that fit for us. So I wanted to revisit my preferred coping strategies that I mentioned earlier, and then I wanted to put them within the context of the pandemic. If you look at the things on this list that I can do within the pandemic now, and living in Central Texas versus Southern California, where the ocean is not available to me anymore as easily, currently I can do wine and I can do controlled tasks, which has really challenged me and a lot of people that I'm talking to about, I've got to get some more coping strategies in this context of a pandemic or of maybe changing physical abilities. The same stuff that's worked isn't working, it's not available to me, so I need to figure some things out, which I've been challenged to do. It's difficult for sure. Which brings up the point of, what are we watering? What are we spending time with? So if I've got my two coping strategies off that list that are still available to me, again, wine and controlled tasks, I'm spending a lot of time with those two things, which means I'm getting very good at them, right? And I'm growing them. If we think about a garden and I'm putting water on half of the garden, what I'm contributing to water to is what's growing. It's what I'm getting better at. Okay? It's the same way with coping strategies. It's the same way with how we think about things, what we're thinking about, how we think about ourselves. And so I want to be very mindful as we're talking here about attending to where you're spending your time. Because wherever you're spending your time is what you're going to get better at. And something that we already have built into all of us, into our lizard brains, from way back when, is a negativity bias. We're extremely good at finding the negative in things, and we had to be biologically, right? So if I'm walking up to a stream because I want to get water, I need to be very able quickly to see where this alligator is, right? I might not have a moment to look around and see the other stuff because I need to know if there's something life-threatening in my way. And so again, if we think about what we're watering, if I'm spending a lot of time looking for the stuff that's bad, I'm going to get really good at it. And because my brain's already pre-wired to do that, I've already got to jump on it. So most of us are really good at doing that. Well, that's got some impacts, right? Because we can take a look at this picture. And the first thing that I see when I look at it is this lawnmower, and this grass seriously needs cut. That mower does not look like it works. Probably needs gas, maybe you need to check the oil. I don't know how to do that. I don't even have any gas or oil here. I'm never going to get this cut. And look, those bushes need trimmed, and that's my negativity bias working. If I step back and take a moment, which I'll introduce in a minute as mindfulness, then I'm going to be able to see what else is there in this present moment. And I might focus on the rose that I didn't even notice was there a minute ago because I'm focusing all on the negative impacts that this backyard is going to have on my life. So again, all of that is to share that it is very normal for us to see things negatively. And when we're stressed, we default to that, which means that I'm going to see this little tiny kitten and I'm going to react to it like it's that saber-toothed tiger, when really it's just this kitten. But my brain, my fight, flight, or freeze response doesn't know that. My fight, flight, or freeze response is launching adrenaline and epinephrine and cortisol into my system so that I can run away. I don't need to run away from this kitten. Okay, I would need to run away from that tiger, sure. Even things. So just a way to think about, is this a kitten that I'm dealing with? Or is this a saber-toothed tiger? And in those moments, can I bring myself back to grounded so that I can cope with what is actually there? Again, most of us have years of reacting in this way because of the negativity bias and a number of different things that we're going to react towards the tiger versus the kitten. So, okay, just said all this stuff. What in the world can I do about it? So this is the part where hopefully we're going to take away some skills that I want to teach you or refresh you on today if you're already familiar with some of these things. And these are the things that we know to be helpful. Diaphragmatic breathing, practicing gratitude, self-compassion, mindfulness, meditation, and building hope. And just kind of depending on how much time we have is how much time we'll spend on each of these things. One of the coolest and simplest, easiest things that we can do is breathe. I know this is complicated for some folks who have lung involvement. But one way that we try to help people breathe is to do it from the diaphragm. So that's from your stomach. And the way that we do this is keep one hand on your stomach, one hand on your chest. And it's really deep belly breaths. And I like to share this breathing pacer because that's going to tell us how we should pace our breathing. And there's a number of these online. You can Google breathing pacer GIF. They've got some where you can set the times so it fits a little bit better with kind of your lung capacity and how you breathe. But the trick really is to do belly breathing and strengthen your diaphragm. And you shouldn't feel your chest moving up and down too much. So in this, that's the exhale right there. And as it expands, right here, that's going to be your inhale. If you have trouble getting a deep breath because of lung involvement or any other reason, the best thing you can do is just try to get a really great exhale, push all the breath out of your body that you can, and then your body will automatically take in all the breath it possibly can. So what this does really nicely is it slows our breathing. It regulates the oxygen levels in our body, right? Because it gets to our lung, it gets to our blood circulation, it gets to our brain, it does all these things, and it just helps us slow things down a little bit because when we get chronically stressed, we get reactive. And even by just doing this for a few seconds, it helps us slow down. And it creates a little bit more space for us to make some different decisions. Viktor Frankl has a famous quote that I will not get completely accurate right here, but essentially that there's between a stimulus and a response, there's a moment, there's a space there. And it's in that space where we get to choose our reaction. So many times it feels like that's automatic, it's like stimulus response. What do you think with taking a few breaths? We put a little space in between stimulus and response, and we get to make a different decision and feel like we have a little bit more control over what our response is going to be. And you can Google diaphragmatic breathing. There's a ton of different exercises, YouTubes, where you can watch people train you on it. Some people do it sitting down, lying down. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. But again, something that's very helpful. Something else that is very helpful, and again, I don't purport for these to be easy things to do at all. They take practice. So practice, that's why I say practicing gratitude. It's not being grateful. That feels, again, like a very high bar. Let's just practice having gratitude. What this does is helps our brain overcome its natural bias towards negativity. There's been a lot of research on this, actually. So grateful people, turns out, are happier, less depressed, less stressed, more satisfied with relationships. They have a higher sense of purpose, better coping skills, less trouble sleeping, and stronger circles of support than people who aren't practicing gratitude. So they measured this at 1 week after practicing gratitude, but then also at 3 and 6 months, they went back and measured it and found people were still experiencing positive impact from practicing gratitude. And again, keep the bars low on this. Like, be grateful for whatever your body or your life brings you in that day. I think I've greater appreciation this week for things like running water and hot water and electricity than maybe I did a month ago. And so again, keeping the bar low, even if you have hand involvement, but you were able to get the cabinet open, thank you, hand, for doing that for me today. And we can always do that. However reachable those goals need to be, let's keep them in. Definitely, if you've heard me talk before, you have heard me espouse the amazingness of self-compassion. Self-compassion is made up of a few different things: mindfulness, self-kindness, and connectedness. We'll talk about mindfulness in a minute, and self-kindness as well in more depth. Self-kindness is essentially treating yourself as you would treat someone you love. We're not always as great at treating ourselves kindly as we do somebody who we truly care about. We give other people so much grace, and sometimes people wouldn't even care for it. We give more grace than we give ourselves, and so that's really something to pay attention to. So remember, we're talking about self-care here. Everything I'm talking about so far is free, right? I don't have to pay anything out for it. And with what I love about self-kindness is it's free and we can do it in our head. Nobody even has to know we're doing it. And it has really amazing gains. Connectedness is a reminder that everybody is human. We all make mistakes. We all struggle. Nobody's immune from the human experience. We're not alone. But I think sometimes when we can't be that person that we want to be and be our best self, we hold back and we isolate. And that's maybe when we need others the most to connect to about suffering, because part of life is suffering. And I don't think it's a realistic expectation that our bar be that I live a life without suffering. That's what I need to do to be happy, because we know that's not an option. That's not part of this gig. So the coping strategies we're talking about today are to help us cope with suffering. So self-criticism versus self-compassion. I think a lot of us of a certain generation, mine and prior to, were brought up with self-criticism as a motivating force. I kind of think of the example of maybe a football coach or a sports coach who kind of gets on to people, maybe insults people in order to motivate. That is effective, but it's also strongly correlated with depression and life dissatisfaction. We can achieve the same gains with self-compassion as we do with self-criticism without the depression and dissatisfaction. So if just by being self-compassionate, so talking to myself kindly, treating myself kindly, not being so hard on myself, actually has some hormonal and neurotransmitter impacts on our body. So this blows my mind every time I talk about it. Just by talking kindly to myself in my head, I don't have to say it out loud, I can. I get increased levels of oxytocin in my body. Oxytocin is thought to be like the love hormone. It helps us feel connected, warm, safe. It facilitates feelings of compassion for ourselves and others. It also counteracts cortisol being the stress hormone. So just by being kind to yourself, you're creating something in your body that can defeat the stress hormone, which blows my mind, and I think it's just the coolest thing. Oxytocin reduces fear and anxiety, all these things that feel really difficult and unpleasant. So the next time you find yourself speaking unkindly to you, I want you to think about someone you truly care and love, and put them in the same situation and ask yourself, would I say those things to that person that I'm saying to myself right now? And usually the answer is no. And when you find yourself being very self-critical, I want you to think about, what am I observing and feeling right now? I feel angry and I feel disappointed in myself. And I feel kind of like my chest is spinning. What do I need right now? I need something that feels comforting. So I've got my little hot tea right here off camera. So maybe I need some hot tea and I need to take some deep breaths. Do I have a request of myself or someone else? Yeah, you know what? I'm supposed to do this thing this afternoon and I'm not going to be able to make it. So I need to ask my friend if it's okay if we reschedule. And that's going to help me feel better about where I'm at. So that's it really is such an important thing to be able to do, to speak to ourselves in a kind way. Again, sounds easy to say, it's extraordinarily difficult, and it is a practice. Some days it's easier than others, especially if anybody who identifies as a perfectionist, we're not awesome at doing it. And so in thinking about changing critical self-talk, these are the things to do. Notice when you're doing it. Sometimes that's difficult because it's so habitual. Then I want you to make an active effort to soften the voice with compassion instead of self-judgment. So that means being aware of the tone you're using towards yourself, the words you're using towards yourself, the pace of the thoughts. Just slow it down, soften your words, and again, use the words and tones towards yourself that you would towards someone that you love. And try to reframe the observations that are being made by your inner critic in a kind, friendly, positive way. Okay, so the example I always use is, I was out running errands and I did everything except I forgot the dry cleaning. Good God, I was right next door. I was right there. Could have just walked in, drove right by it. That was so stupid. Why do you forget things? You're super forgetful. Why do you always do that? Okay, that's one way to do it. That's a self-critical way. I'm reframing that. I'm thinking, okay, yep, you had a ton to do today. You were rushing from one thing to another, and you forgot that thing. Dry cleaners are open tomorrow, and I can go get it tomorrow, and it's going to be okay. So it's that simple. It can make that significant of a difference in our bodies, which again, this access to oxytocin really helps us combat the effects of chronic stress, which again I think is so cool and still free. So just checking my time here. What is mindfulness? This is something that maybe you've heard about. It's certainly been around for thousands of years in different contexts, and it's now being a little bit rebranded into the Western mindset. And you can find it in any number of places, books, apps, podcasts. Essentially, it means we're paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Different people have different strengths when it comes to this. Some folks are really great at paying attention. They struggle with not judging themselves. Folks might be like, I got the non-judgment thing. I'm doing better at that. I'm doing pretty good at that. But it's really hard for me to stay in the present moment. So this is what it is. And again, it's a practice. No one is supposed to be an expert on it at all. So we're going to think about this as we move through a couple of activities here. So paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Why do we even want to do this, Dr. Maril? Well, here are all the things that has been researched about practicing mindfulness and how it can help scleroderma patients, caregivers, and just humans alike. It reduces pain. It increases people's ability to cope with chronic pain. Decreases symptoms of anxiety, depression, hostility, and the tendency to turn emotional pain into physical pain. Helps us manage stress more effectively, helps us relax more easily. It increases energy, it improves our self-esteem, and it helps us learn to cope more effectively with both short-term and long-term stressful situations. If you put this in front of me on a page and say, would you like these things? I am absolutely 100% yes, please sign me up. How do I do this? So again, remember, we're going to be paying attention on purpose. We're going to be in the present moment, non-judgmentally. You can do mindfulness anywhere. Cleaning, cooking, vacuuming, whatever household chore or whatever it is. Even at work, you can try to be mindful in conversations. You can practice mindfulness. You can do it anywhere. Again, it's free. There's some really great apps out there that can help coach you through this. Headspace is a good one. I really enjoyed calm.com. They have a lot of different meditations for a lot of different things, including things like pain, if that's something that you're living with, or with anxiety. I think there's studies specifically in there for types of anxiety, so fear of flying, all sorts of different things where we can use mindfulness and also meditation to cope a little bit better. Okay, so we are just going to try a little mindfulness exercise right now. Just want to have you take a minute and look at this flower mindfully. So you're gonna do that on purpose, right here and now, non-judgmentally. So I'll walk you through what's happening in my head. And starting at the center, I'm noticing how many different colors of yellow there are in that, how it starts almost golden, and then somehow the yellow lightens and it turns into white. And somehow this all turns into a very beautiful pink. I notice the water droplets on it. Maybe it just rained. And if I'm in Southern California, and I'm thinking, oh, it rained. It never rains here. That's really nice. We need that. We're in a drought. Yep, we're in a drought. Climate change is scary. Yeah, things might get really bad. We're kind of running out of water. What happens when I run out of water? That feels really scary. Right. So what I'm doing there is coming out of the present moment. Right. I'm starting to think way ahead. That's anxiety. We're not present, but we're thinking, worrying ahead. That's anxiety. If I'm looking at this and thinking about things in the past, that leads towards depression. So by staying in this present moment, then I'm just here mindfully. I'm not in the worry. I'm not in the remorse. I'm just here. So I also do that, and I can judge myself very harshly. Oh my God, you can't look at a flower for like 10 seconds without worrying about climate change. Right? That's one thing I could do. Or I could say, yeah, that's something that feels really scary, and I can only do so much my part to control it, and I'm going to refocus. And there's nothing wrong. Like our mind is built to wander. So when you find yourself meditating and you're wandering, that's just a reminder to come back to the present. And that's all it is. It's not you're a failure at meditation, you can't do it. That's not it. Meditation isn't really even about clearing your mind of all thoughts. It's attending to your mind. And our mind thinks and it wanders, and then we just bring it back. So that's an example of mindfulness. Again, it's just like going to the gym. We have to work it out. It gets easier. And the more we do it, the more automatic it becomes, the better we're able to deal with things like chronic stress. And again, to slow things down. These are muscles we're working out in a gym. We know from looking at studies of neuroplasticity that we can strengthen different halves of neurons the more that we do them. So maybe right now I've got some really strong ones with that negativity bias, right? Well, I can combat that by building up these other neurons to make like a super highway where I can just navigate right past all that. And that's somehow in our control, which again I think is very relieving and nice to know. Another piece that we'll do just real briefly, because I do want to make the point that meditation doesn't have to be like a week-long silent retreat. It can be 2 minutes. Let's just step into a brief meditation practice. And this is kind of nice to be doing this virtually, because usually when I do this in real life, people get uncomfortable and get a little squirmy because I'm asking them to do some like hippy dippy stuff. But since we're all just in the comfort of our own homes, probably, I'll ask you to do this, and I just invite you to take a deep breath. And when you're comfortable, begin to close your eyes. If you aren't comfortable with closing your eyes, you can just choose a place on the floor to focus your gaze on. And take another deep breath. And just take a moment to imagine yourself being more calm, more peaceful, and more focused. And as you allow your unconscious mind to naturally conjure an image of what that would look like, consider what you might be seeing. And think about what you might be hearing. And what you might be feeling. It's showing you that you're more calm, peaceful, and focused. And maybe you're already feeling a little more calm, peaceful, and focused. And now maybe you can think of a simple way to incorporate that calmer feeling into your life in the days ahead. Just by slowing down, thinking about that image of what being more peaceful might look like for you. And know that this really can be an easy way to create a little more peace and calm in your life. I invite you now to take a breath for a moment. Another nice deep breath. And begin to move your attention back to the room. Listen to the sounds around you, and when you're comfortable, open your eyes. So I didn't time that, but I suspect it was less than 2 minutes. And my hope is that you were able to get an image in your mind of what calm might feel like, look like, sound like, and that you can practice revisiting that, and that you can do it in 2 minutes. Take 5. When you're first starting to learn to meditate, 5 minutes will feel like 1 hour. It's really challenging. The meditation also has really great rewards, similar to self-compassion. A study I like to quote shows that meditation can help reduce anxiety symptoms by 70%, which that's meditation, not medication. Right? And it reduces, some studies show, depressive symptoms on par with the efficacy rate of antidepressant, a meditative practice. So often, I know how many pills Scleroderma patients take. You don't want to do more than they have to. And for some folks, this can be a way to either avoid needing antidepressants or just a nice adjunct to taking antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. And all of these are valid ways to treat anxiety and depression. There's no, I don't attach any shame to any way that people choose to combat these difficulties. The last thing I want to talk about, again, yet another free way to combat chronic stress, is building hope. And I'm thinking about this specifically in the context of a pandemic. And these are the ways that we're really thinking about this and how we're working with people right now to build hope during this time. Practicing a positive outlook, that is easier some days than others, for sure. But again, practicing gratitude goes along with that one. It's important to focus on possibilities and positive possibilities. Understanding that growth is still possible. We are always growing and always learning if we're open to it, which is always a nice reminder that we don't know everything and we're not done cooking just yet. You also really want to normalize that sadness and nostalgia are really normal in this context. Certainly miss being able to go out without a mask and being able to go to concerts. And just being able to just, hang out with my parents and not worry about all the safety things that might impact them. It's also important to remember your strengths and acknowledge them. We all have them. You've got them. And if you have trouble connecting with them, try to think about a time in your life where you felt strong and like you were just doing well. And ask yourself, what was I doing then? What were those things? You know what? Maybe I was exercising a little bit, maybe taking a walk once a week. Maybe I realized that I was really good at a certain skill and I was doing that. And can I figure out how to do that again? Practicing self-care, as I mentioned earlier. Taking some time to take pride in your work, and that doesn't have to be with work at your job. It's whatever you're doing. It's literally whatever you're doing. Even if it's cleaning the house or getting your hair straightened or whatever it is. Remind yourself the pandemic is temporary, and also that hope and hopelessness are not mutually exclusive. We can really be feeling them both at the same time somehow. And so trying to find things to feel hopeful for is going to make a huge difference in how you're feeling cognitively and emotionally. Yeah, that brings us to our question time. And so I will turn it back over to the hosts to see if any questions came up in the chat that I could be helpful in answering.
Hi, Dr. Maril. This is Diane. Thank you so much for your presentation. So we're going to bring Misty Chapman and Stacy Graff on to ask some questions that have been offered up. And okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera and microphone, and I'll listen in.
Hi, Dr. Maril. Do you recommend keeping a grateful journal, a journal in which you maybe write one or several things that you're grateful for that day? Or, you know, hey, I was able to open up the cabinets today without any problem, or open a jar without any problems. Do you recommend maybe doing an exercise like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's actually been some studies around it of trying of when to do it, how to do it. For some folks, it is great to write it down. It just gets to a different area of the brain if we're writing it down. But also for some folks, you know, some folks maybe want to speak it into their notes app, you know, or I tend to do just a mental list and do it in the morning. And again, really low bar of, you know, these are the things I'm grateful for, you know, my partner, my parents, my cats, you know, just those things. And I make a mental list, and research shows if we're starting it with like 3 to 5 things in the morning, and then before we go to bed at night, another 3 to 5 things, we're going to feel better during the day, and we're going to sleep better at night. Again, it's a little bit magical. But yeah, I definitely would recommend it. Yeah, kind of in any one of those ways that might feel helpful for your specific situation.
Okay, we have another question. Meditation feels so easy on some days and so difficult on others. Do you have suggestions on how I can become more consistent?
Oh, I mean, I would say just practice, but then also practicing kindness, because that's exactly what it is. And you're exactly right. Some days you can just get right into it and you're like hit that flow and you've got it. And then other days, for whatever reason, it's just not there. So the only thing I can recommend at those times is to practice self-compassion. It's a really cool opportunity actually for you to be able to practice self-compassion in those moments and not be hard on yourself for it. But yeah, I mean that is the crux. It's a really great thing to point out.
Great, thank you. One last question. My mind always wanders when I try to meditate, and I fight to control my thoughts. Is it okay to fight those thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I like to think about it, and you may have heard these metaphors before, but it's helpful for me to think about I'm a fish and I'm swimming around and there's a lot of hooks, and the hooks are my thoughts. And so I can choose to fight, latch onto that hook, knowing there's going to be some consequence to it. Or can, in my mind, I swim by that hook and avoid it. Not avoid it, notice it, recognize, okay, this thing that I have to do for work, that's one of those hooks over there. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't feed the birds this morning. I need to make sure that I do that. That's another hook, right? And those can be infinite. So I like to think of those as just reminders that my brain is doing what it's supposed to do, and then recenter myself. And some people like to recenter either with a mantra or on a specific noise, or even on a candle flame, whatever it is that you use to recenter in meditation, bring it back to that. It can also be a visualization, you know, of just, okay, maybe I'm just this fish swimming and I'm swimming past the hooks. I know they're there. And I can choose to bite them if I want to. I can always do that. But I can also choose not to.
Do we have a quick minute for one more question?
Yes.
Okay, my family and friends ask how they can help me, but I never know what to say that would make me feel better. What do you do to help your mother?
Hmm. Well, it's a great question. It's difficult to know what people need because despite all my best efforts, I have yet to figure out mind reading. You know, and even though I've known my mom for 45 years, I still don't always know what she needs. I can anticipate some things, but not all the things. So I think it is helpful when she can name it, but then I also know, um, like if I'm going over for a visit, I know there's certain things that it's just it's better if I do, whether it's like stuff outside or moving heavy things around or maybe taking a meal over. So just trying to anticipate those needs. But yeah, I do encourage people to ask because we don't have that mind reading piece, but then that also it puts a little bit of a burden on the patient, right, to know what they need also. And that I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily either to get in touch with what our needs are. I think historically also women have been conditioned to like not have needs and just to figure out what other people need and meet those, right? So really starting to attend to what we need, what's going to help for us, and then kind of challenge ourselves then to ask for it. That's also a really difficult thing. Can be helpful too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Maril. Thank you, Stacy and Misty, too, for the questions and keeping that going. Well, Dr. Merrill, we really appreciate your time today. It's so helpful just to stop and think about ourselves for a little while and what we need, other than medications, medical, doctor's visits. So appreciate you giving us a lot of good solutions for today and a way to think about ourselves and really very practical solutions for us. So appreciate your time today and your presentations.